Everybody see me moving? Let me see. I think everybody sees that, right? And if everybody could mute their mics, because there's a lot of like background noise too. Okay. Let me see. Okay, there we go. So let's jump into it. So, astrology, the first house. As I said earlier, this is a lot of shit that we're going to cover, and it's thick and it's dense. And any of you who have ever gotten into astrology, have been interested, lukewarm, I want to say over the years, or like you've just been kind of on the periphery of it. Please don't mind the coughing. Um, it's you know how dense the information is. Every question leads you to about 5 million other questions, and maybe sometimes you'll see something on TikTok or back on Twitter when it used to be Twitter or Instagram, where someone will say something very strange like, "Oh, if Mars is in the seventh house, you're more likely to get into bar fights," or some weird random shit like that, and you're like, "Holy fuck, how do people, how do people know this?" And you'll think of it maybe somebody's pulling shit out of their ass, and then a bunch of people are like, "Yeah, my Mars is in the seventh house, and I get into a ton of bar fights." I don't think that that's necessarily the truth. I just pulled that out of my ass. But you'll notice that astrology is a very dense subject and topic. So what we're going to do is something very special. I've learned how to organize all this information energetically, which means when the energy of some of the entities that exist in the first house come around me or by me, I immediately know that I am the frequency or my first house channels are open. In other words, I know that I am somehow the sense of me, the center of me is lighting up things that have to do with the first house. In other words, I know where I am. And if I know where I am, I know how to act in my environment. And so we're going to talk about how to kind of like how do you develop that sense? The ability to be able to know, first of all, intuitively that this topic, this idea, this concept, what you're looking at on a chart, what the first house is, how to feel that, how to like get the energetic grasp of that. And if you have, because you're fairly intermediate, this might be something that really helps amp up your process. And if you are a beginner, this is definitely a great place to form a very strong foundation. So, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of play with the Greeks for a minute. And we're going to look at this door. And also, I'd like to say for the sense of things, I always start every client call explaining to people that we're all planets. We're like individual planets as people. And because of that, you have your planet, I have my planet. Nobody can go to your planet unless you invite them in. Nobody can People can come over and they can fuck shit up, but you can also kick them off. Sometimes you can forget that you can kick people out of your internal world, so to speak. And sometimes you very much know that people are there and you have a hard time inviting people into your internal world. But we as human beings are individual planets. And so if you think of yourself as a planet, Mars is also a planet. Venus is also a planet, right? So if you imagine yourself as a planet being such a diverse like it's your life, you are a diverse entity, you have a whole fucking life going on, and nobody else really knows like what your life looks like, how it works. Even the people who live with you, because they've got a whole life going on, don't know what your life looks like, what it feels like, and all of that. So the way that people can get to know that is an emotional connection. This is when we are listening to people, when we're not listening to see ourselves, or to I should say, we're not listening to speak, we're not listening to solve a problem, we're listening simply to understand what someone is saying. So in other words, someone is speaking to you and you are listening only to be able to factually understand what they're saying and from what perspective they're saying it. No feelings, no judgments, no nothing. You are just trying to understand another person. That act in itself changes your energy, and this is what creates an emotional connection, or a connection where we are sharing information. That's all an emotional connection is. A lot of people equate emotional connections to good feelings, But you can be emotionally connected to people who give you really bad feelings. Like, what about the people who come by and give you high anxiety? You're emotionally connected, feeling the anxiety, right? And it's connected to them in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean that they're sending it to you. It just means that your connection is riddled with anxiety for some reason on your side. But that emotional connection doesn't end with just people. Sharing information or sharing energy is something that you can do beyond with a person, but also with a thing. That's why some people have clairvoyances where they touch an item and they can see stories, they feel things, they understand where this item's been and who's had it before. You can do that with animals. Tons of people. I mean, any animal that you see with a personality, you have established an emotional connection because that animal just so happens to be very loud. It's very expressive, is what I'll say. It expresses the information of itself to such a degree that you are picking up on there's something different about this cat than any other cat. But most certainly, you can do it with things like other planets in the sky. And so that's kind of what we're going to do here. Um, Looking at this door, looking at this red door, is we are going to acknowledge the fact that you are an entity of yourself, your own world, and every emotional connection that you form is a door to another world. Now, I love this concept of doors. There's a book that I have. It's under a pen name, so if you if you find it and you recognize me in it, then I guess you'll know. But there's a lot of door magic in this book, and the point is that a door. Think Howl's Moving Castle. You can use the same door to open up to many different places, or you can simply pick a door that matches the energy of the place you're trying to get to. When you imagine the door and you open it, you are opening it to all of the information that comes from the other side. And so we're going to kind of practice that when it comes to, and I'll guide you and walk you through it, when it comes to listening to information about the first house, listening to the stories that I'm going to tell you about the first house and the kinds of storylines, or I should say, information that makes a lot of sense. A story, right? It's a sequential, it's ordered. So, information that's already organized and ordered, or a story, I'm going to tell you stories that exist in this space, the first house. All of the motifs, the symbols, all of that kind of stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge. I'm sorry, I got to drink my tea real quick. Oh. The seasons have changed drastically where I'm at, and I'm all phlegmy. It's a mess. But there we go. What we're gonna I swear to God, I sound like everybody's English teacher who drinks coffee early in the morning. I can't believe this is happening to me. Anyways, what we're gonna do is I'm borrowing this from the Greeks. It's called a memory palace. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna think. I want you to visually. This is why I keep leaving the image on this ram here, and this red door. Is I want you to think and to really just keep looking at this image and know that you are about to open the door to an entire planet, Mars. You already know Mars. You know things about Mars. You've heard random bits and pieces about Mars. So this isn't so foreign to you. You already know visually what Mars looks like. And if you don't, we'll kind of go over it. But it doesn't matter what it looks like. You'll probably never go there physically, and you never probably want to. Especially after you hear some of the things that could happen to you on Mars. You might not want to go there physically. Maybe you want to keep it as a spiritual or a fire or a energetic kind of thing. But on the other side of this door is Mars. And anytime, because you have this door, you can go to or interact with the energy of Mars spiritually. Now, this is an active work of your imagination, but I'm going to tell you why this works. This is how people used to memorize oral poems that spanned for hours. You can imagine, how can an orator get up on stage and recount a poem they've only ever heard, first of all, and then second of all, to be able to do it verbatim without a mistake for hours, and then have multiple of those, multiple volumes of Iliads and such. You have to ask yourself, how can people make a career out of memorizing every single fucking audiobook they've ever heard of in their entire life and then recounting them to people? they use this. They use memory palaces. In other words, they would go like it. You can get real complicated with it, but you think of, I want everybody to Google it on their own free time because I don't want to go too much into it. But you think of a place in your mind that you're already familiar with, and you hold information there. And when you hold information in that space in your mind, whenever you need to recall that information, you think immediately of that place in your mind, and then all of the information comes to you. Essentially, what a memory palace is the organization of the mental mind space. People, we need to organize our physical space, right? You just don't throw all the shit that you own in our room, all your kitchen supplies, your bedroom supplies, your toiletries, your clothes, everything just in one room in a pile, nothing organized. You'd go insane. You'd go crazy. You'd eventually start organizing it. All the kitchen stuff goes to the left, all the bedroom stuff goes to the right, bathroom stuff goes to the back. You'd start organizing it simply for ease of access, right? For no other reason besides ease of access. Well, we have to do that mentally as well. It's not taught very often, so it's an exercise of imagination, but you'll notice that you'll probably love to use this for many other things. And especially if you're going to energy work or you're an alchemist or anything like that, you want to find ways in which you organize the things in which you cannot see. And that's all energy. That's how your intuition works. You'll start to rely on, instead of thinking, oh, I need to know the answer, your intuition will send you to the room in which the answer is, and you'll automatically know what the answer is because you'll know what room you're in and why you're in the room. It'll just make sense to you. And that's essentially, if you think of channeled readers and stuff, many people organize all sorts of, I guess, spiritual phenomena, what consciously or unconsciously. And then, they use their coping mechanism or their trick to kind of get into that space. Well, this is how you can do it without needing a trick to do it. And so now that we've spent plenty of time staring at this red door with this ram, it's very aggressive, but in a very beautiful way, we're going to take a step on into the first house. Okay. So first, the first house is the house of self. And man, I felt like that was self-explanatory. But it's not. It's not if you're on the path of self-discovery or self-mastery. The house of self is never it's an explanatory thing, but it's never ending, because the house of self is a place of perpetual growth. This is a place where you were born with a purpose and a path, and because you're born with a purpose and a path, you are set to grow. This is a seed put in the ground for a reason. A seed put in the ground for a reason is perpetually growing even when it is dying, because it offshoots other seeds and regenerates itself through, living on through its, its seedlings and all that kind of stuff. So the house of self is this ever and never ending cycle of birth, rebirth, birth, life, and rebirth. It's the encompassment of all of that. It's the encompassing of the entire story of you. And so, it's everything and nothing all at one time, similar to like Pisces and Virgo energy. And I'll explain how that works. But let's jump into some of the concepts of it. We've got self-identity, beginnings, appearance, persona, initiation, birth, individuality. I'll let you keep reading later on your own leisure. But there's a lot of these concepts of who am I in these stories, or very much I am. The question is, who am I? And the answer is I am. And it's that constant back and forth. You will always be asking yourself in any new situation, who am I? And then eventually, in order to remove yourself from the situation or to grow in the situation, you acknowledge I am. And what that means, well, that's contextual, and it's based on, a lot of different things for everybody in any given moment. And that's the fun in life, right? But let's look at some of the stories that live in this place. So the mythos of the first house, or the stories that really belong in the first house, are the stories of identity and beginnings. I absolutely love this energy because I'm an Aries rising. So, naturally I'm ruled by this, the first house, so I'm biased. But when we look at the beginning myths, we're going to look at Athena and Narcissus specifically. And if you're into Greek mythology, you'll probably enjoy this aspect or this tie-in. And if not, you need not know these things. I'm going to talk to you about the myths and what they mean and all that kind of stuff. But I do recommend, if you're going to be studying astrology, especially from the Western viewpoint, or especially if you speak English is your native language, You might want to start with the Greeks because there's just a plethora of that information that you're not going to have a really hard time associating, because most of your media is about these stories perpetuated, retold 1,000 times. So it's going to be really easy for you to digest it versus stepping into someone else's culture. I always recommend that people start off with astrology, using it and viewing astrology through the lens of their own culture, their native cultures. And it's more to do with the fact that natively you understand and you have more experience with the archetypes and the symbols than you do in someone else's culture. When you use someone else's culture, there's a lot of room for misinterpretations, miscommunications. That being said, I also recommend that people look at other cultures so that they can see the tie ins and understand and grow and expand. But in order to master something, always master the self before you try to master someone else's. In other words, um, and to be totally honest, I think through the mastering of the self, you learn that you could never master someone else. So there's something to be said there. So when it comes to Athena, funny enough, I'm going to give a brief on how Athena came about. So everybody knows Zeus to some degree. I mean, like, he's the big guy in charge on Mount Olympus. But if you know his story, you know that his dad tried to eat him. That's like Cronus, Saturn energy, the Grim Reaper, all of that. Anyways, he was told that his kids were going to, usurp him one day. And so he ate them all except Zeus, who saved his siblings and then, ran Mount Olympus as the new generation. And so Zeus was out having kids, and he was having kids with this one goddess who's like the most cleverest of them all. And a prophecy was told that his, child from this goddess was going to be more clever than him. And so he ate her. Well, technically, he ate her mother who was pregnant with her, which is insane, right? Because it's like, wow, way to continue the generational trauma, Dad. Like, I don't understand how you could fight for your freedoms and the freedoms of your siblings and stuff, and then turn around and do the same thing. That's fucked up. But it's also Zeus. He's chronically doing some weird fucked up shit and putting his dick in places that it really doesn't belong. That being said, Athena came into being. You can't eat a clever bitch and her clever fucking daughter and not expect something to go sideways. And so Zeus was getting these massive fucking headaches, and he goes over to another god and he's like, oh my god, you gotta help me. And the guy's like, well, I'll just make a weapon and split your head open and that should relieve things. And they did that, which again, absolutely fucking insane. And some myths say it was Hephaestus who made a lot of the armory for the gods, and some myths say it was Prometheus, which makes me feel like if it was Prometheus, he was definitely up to something. He was, Prometheus was somebody who really was willing to stand on business in a lot of different ways. But that being said, they split his head open, and out comes Athena. This is her birth. She's got a full shield and armor on, a sword, and this bitch is ready to go to fucking battle. Like, she is a generational curse breaker. With Athena, it ends with her. Not only was she smart enough to spend all that time in the fucking womb soaking in all of the god powers of everything and everyone around her. The strongest, god that there was, Zeus, hers. The cleverest one that there was, her mother, who got eaten and was like, that's fine. I'm going to stay in this very safe place and raise my daughter to be the strongest and the most brilliant beast that there has ever been. Yeah. I mean, we can all say that maybe her mom trapped Zeus, because think about this. Her Hera has a really massive fucking issue with Zeus's infidelity, but she always has this issue where she seems to take it out on the other broads instead of, taking it out on Zeus, probably because it would upset things and, they have to keep Mount Olympus secure, because if they don't, what happens at home, right? Who knows why she seems to direct her ear at all of these other women instead of her husband. However, you got to be a really clever bitch to have an affair with Zeus and then put yourself in the safest place that there possibly could be. And that's the one place she won't attack. So, again, Athena's mother, the smartest bitch that there ever was. When you say clever, that's some clever fucking shit. So, this is war. This is war, but it's not physical and it's not brutal. And that's what Athena stands for. If you're going to have to go through some really tough fucking shit, you stack the odds against you. If you're going to have to say no to something, you say no with the full brute force of an entire army, an entire legion of gods behind you. That's Athena. Athena is a curse breaker. She's the first to say no. She's the first to win because she's the first to know. First of all, if she's going to join a game, it's one that she's already won. And that's it. Every war that she goes to bat on, I mean, I won't say every, I don't know about everyone, but I do know with the Trojan War, Aries, who we'll get to him, or Mars, we'll get to him. He backed the Trojans and they lost. They lost. And Mars is home territory, which is battle. Mars is the epitome of battle. He is war. He is the god of all wars, and Athena won. So she's that energy. She brings the sword to the battle. She brings the truth. She brings intelligence. The self is about and self mastery is about the ability to be intelligent about the battles that you fight, be intelligent about the obstacles you face, to be strategic, to be thoughtful, to think long term, to think if I can't beat them, then I'll join them. That was her mother. If I can't beat Hera and Zeus, and if I can't beat Zeus, because once he says he wants to have sex with you, you say no, things go crazy. He's not well. He's not well. I think we can really say that about Zeus. There's something that makes him not well all the time. Maybe because he's a giant gas planet, if you think Jupiter. But I think it was Metis. If you can't beat them, then join them. And she physically joined him, made herself the safest place in the entire existence of all metaphysical galaxies and physical ones alike, so that she could raise her daughter to be a curse breaker, to be the strongest that there has ever been. Nobody fucks with Athena, and that's the thing. So if you take anything, Athena exists in this first house. If you are ever in a situation where you have to stand on business, but it's not rumination because you're not going mad. You just know that you're right. You know the facts. This is this is Olivia Pope. This is How to Get Away with Murder. What's her name? This is you don't want to go to court against this person. This is the person who either talks over you and is right, buries you with the right information, or this is someone who says absolutely nothing except the right thing at the right time that fucks you up completely. This is that energy. If you ever feel yourself being the person who's about to bury someone with that fucking information, if you feel yourself being someone who's about to best the situation because you're bringing an olive branch instead of an argument, if you ever have been the person who's about to tip the scales in your favor because you had a clever idea, and if your clever idea was rooted in goodness and the best in the serving of all instead of just yourself, that's Athena. That is you standing in yourself in the first house. When you see yourself, you know yourself, that's confidence. Confidence to think, confidence to, it's not plotting and scheming. It's the confidence to be strategic, to take risk, but calculated risk. Athena is, by all means, she's a beast, but of the best variety, the best kind. Now, there's a lot of different stories also that Athena has within her complex. And I want to mention a few of them before we move on. Let me see. Okay, so I talked about the olive tree, right? Athena is known in Greece for the olive tree in Athens. I think she was trying to win over Athens before it was Athens. It was between her and Poseidon. And they were in a contest on how the person who was going to be the god who was, the most renowned in Athens or worshipped there, be able to build their temple, was the one who could win over the people. So Poseidon, he, put down his mighty sword or some shit like that, and he drew up a saltwater spring. This meant commerce for everybody. This meant literally like, let me see. It symbolizes, right, naval power and commerce. The seas, they could make money. They can go out and conquest and they can make money. And Athena gifted everyone the olive tree. And that was because not only could they make money with it amongst themselves, but they could use it. They could use the olive oil was used in, let me see. I was using so much shit that I was so surprised because I didn't know that you could do some things with with olives. Okay, so we have like olive oil. was great, like cooking, lighting, religious rituals, making it a fundamental part of daily life. Yeah, because, a lot of the anointing that happened was with olive oil. People also used olive oil to cleanse themselves. The olive oil was used for so many different things. And it's just kind of this idea with Athena is that she thought about the wellness of everyone. If she gave them a tree, and they could have abundance with it, it would help them in their daily personal lives. It would help them in their mercantile lives because they could make things. And, olive oils is a resource. They could make all sorts of different things and trade amongst themselves and others. But it wasn't just about what they could go get for themselves, it was about nurturing them from the inside out. And that's the thing about Athena. Athena figures out this self. How do you nurture yourself from the inside out? How do you take care of you so that then you can turn around and take care of others? And that's the lesson there with Athena. We have a few other ones. I mean, I do want to look at one when it comes to, I already mentioned the Trojan War, but I want to look at when that comes to Medusa and Perseus. A lot of people understand the Medusa myth, and we tend to really look, in the past. I'm I'm much older than I appear. So back when I was in school, Medusa was a bitch because, not that that was my necessary opinion. I always thought it was a bit strange that they were going in there chopping off the heads of women. I was like, it doesn't seem right. But the narrative, very very long time, was that Medusa was a cursed monster, and that was it. It's only been recently, and like since 2020, I want to say 2016, that we've gotten a lot more narratives that look at Medusa from the feminine gaze, and being able to actually look at her myth story and question the fact of, did Athena punish her by making her quote unquote ugly, or did she save her because Medusa was very beautiful, and so she was sexually assaulted at the temple. She was one of the virgins that followed Athena. Athena also represents virginity. But virginity doesn't mean necessarily non sexual. Virginity means they do not take on the role of motherhood caregiver. In other words, I am not a caregiver, I am just myself. Being a caregiver shifts your energy an awful lot. It opens up your channels in different ways, and you end up also not living your life for yourself. And these times, it was, while it was very patriarchal in some aspects, there were also very matriarchal spaces and places. Like, you don't get a place called Athens because it's a patriarchal system. You get a system where people are picking and choosing between patriarchy and matriarchy. And when you understand matriarchy and you understand the general gist of bearing children, is that you are physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally responsible for other creations. You can never turn that off. As a virgin or someone who does not have child, right? And that's it. It's not about sexual proclivities or anything like that. It's about someone who does not carry and or bear children. As that, you have the sanctity of self. When you bear children, you no longer have the sanctity of self because I don't know, like, you've emerged yourself for 9 months with how many ever broods you've created. You are psychically and genetically split, and that does affect your energy. It changes a person, it changes people. It's energetic. So, anyways, Medusa was assaulted, and that brought into question, going to go ahead and guess, her virginity, which again isn't about her sexual purity. It's about whether or not she may have to bear a child or not, lose the sanctity of just self. The temple is only mine. There is no one else who will ever live here. It is mine. This is my planet. As a mother, and specifically what I mean is someone who bears children, births children energetically, your planet no longer is just yours. Your kids forever have access to your planet. You have to actively burn ties and burn psychic connection, or be very stressed during motherhood and very survival situations, all sorts of stuff to turn off that kind of connection. And it's detrimental to both parties because it means that you're in an unhealthy situation to begin with, et cetera, et cetera. So to bear children means that you are forever. You now have some permanent citizens. I have two permanent citizens. They have passports. Everybody else just has a visa. You know what I mean? Everyone else in my life has a visa to my planet. But my kids, they're citizens. I can't get rid of them if I wanted to. Honestly. I mean, physically, out of sight, out of mind, that doesn't mean shit. Spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So that's a huge burden to put on someone by force. That is an ultimate violation. a complete violation of an entire human being, to force upon them to lose the sanctity of self. It's madness. And so the act of turning Medusa into someone who has snakes for hair, she is bitter. She's pissed. She's disgusted. She's resentful. That means no matter how beautiful she is, you have to get past the venom in her to even access her. Nobody wants to get through the venom in her to access her. Nobody wants to go through that. So they leave Medusa alone. And that's the story of Medusa. It's not that she necessarily has snakes for hair, but she also has the knowledge. She has knowledge of what it means to be forced, to be violated in such a way that is terrifying to everybody else. And she spews that knowledge to anybody who will look and who will see. And specifically on men, the perpetrators of such violence. So she's going to go around finding every woman probably and being like, "Hey, did he ask?" That can bring up some very complicated situations depending on the context of the situation. You know what I mean? I don't know. But the act of Perseus, I like to look at it as energetic means. The act of Perseus going to slay Medusa, and this is all happening in the first house, because have you ever been violated before? Your armor shows up in the first house. Medusa is someone whose ego has been completely demolished from the outside in. Someone forcibly stole away her own worldview. So her ego now, the snakes for hair, knowledge, bitterment, resentment, she has something to protect or something to simply attack. Maybe she is protecting herself in perpetuity, which means she's going to attack every son of a bitch who walks by in perpetuity, if that's what's necessary. And in her mind, because of the violence enacted upon her, she's right. And we do that oftentimes in the first house. As a human being, if you've ever felt violated by somebody and totally righteous to be venomous towards them, that is Medusa. It does not have to be sexual assault. It is anything where someone robs you of your own sanctity, your autonomy, your agency. When someone robs you of your choice, your sense of self has been threatened. Medusa. Now, Perseus is a masculine energy, yes, but he comes through, and the purpose of, I should say this, Athena helps Perseus. I had this question. I was like, that's fucking crazy, bitch. How are you going? I was like, oh my God, how are you literally going to help the enemy? Like, he's coming in here to slay this bitch. Why? Because he wants to use her head to go slay another monster. That's fucking crazy. He's using her. I don't understand. Athena, did you really, like, what is going on? So I had to think about it. And, I did some more research. And on the aspect here, I wanted to think about and reframe the concept of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Instead of thinking of Perseus as this external force who has come to slay Medusa, I think of both Athena, the first house, the divine feminine who has been attacked and violated, and the divine masculine who has to come in and end it, to provide safety again, to kill the bitterment, the resentment by sheer force. I am stronger than you. This is our own masculine energy, this Perseus energy that comes in to say, I am stronger than my own fears of the future. I'm stronger than I'm stronger than my trauma. That's what it is. I'm stronger than my trauma, than someone else's will to enact against me, to taking away my agency and my autonomy. I'm stronger than that. And that only comes through with logical thinking from the Athena perspective. Athena, while a fiery energy, she's also made of mostly pure air. Athena's always wearing white. Athena represents the ability to, I don't want to say time doesn't heal things. The ability to adapt a new mindset does. And that only comes through strategic thinking. That comes through reflection. That comes through turning that anger into passion. In other words, the masculine energy and this aspect of Perseus slaying Medusa isn't that your masculine comes in to, poke holes at your feminine. It's the expression, the passionate expression of all of that he took her head to slay another monster. He took Medusa to slay a bigger and a worse monster. So in other words, me too, I'm going to take my trauma and I'm going to turn it on a much bigger monster. I'm going to focus it on something productive to stop something else. And through that is a healing. I'm expressing all of this vitriol, this bitter, this anxious, all of this fucked up energy that's inside of me swirling around, all this knowledge that I have that I don't know what to do with. I'm now going to do something with it, something productive. This is the creative energy of our masculine that comes in and delivers us from our own traumas, our own that. And it's, I don't want to say it delivers us from our just our traumas, because Medusa is more than just trauma. She's the warrior that you develop to cope with that trauma. But when you become stronger than it, you no longer need a warrior to cope with it. And that's a very difficult, like, it's a difficult thing. Anyways, if you know the story of Perseus, you can always watch it on, one of those like Greek, those movies made back in the 80s or the 70s. Hilarious, terrible. Also a little ahead of their time when it comes to special effects. But you can always keep looking and research some of these stories on anywhere from your own leisure. I like to read the text as closely translated as possible. And I'm going to finish. That's all I'm going to say when it comes to Athena. I think I want to move on to Perseus really quick. And let me see. Man, yeah, I'm also working on an astrology guidebook. That's what all these notes are really coming from. So you guys will hear more about that later. It's gonna be more in depth than this. This is kind of the zines, the visual material for us in class. Whereas his guidebook is gonna be like hundreds of pages long. It's one of those things that breaks down everything. But what I want to do is talk about narcissists here, because I know that I hear a lot of the stories or the concepts of narcissists, and also you have like the mental illness narcissism that comes from narcissists, and so it really skews the story and how it is in our psyche. It also makes the concept super negative, and I find that when you have a negative connotation to a concept, it makes you less likely and less open to learning about it in an honest way, and more like learning about it from a place of fear or disgust, depending on like whatever your relation with it is. But Narcissus is the story. Essentially, he's just a guy who was really fucking attractive, right? And so he was so attractive, everybody loved him, and he was fucking annoyed by that. This is pretty privilege to a tilt. People treat him differently, and you have to think about it. When somebody has pretty privilege, depending on what people think they're allowed to do to somebody who is pretty and what they think they're allowed to have from somebody who is pretty, you can be treated in a lot of really fucked up ways. Sometimes people think that you're easy, meaning I just have to tell you that you're pretty and then I can start touching on you. It's crazy. Sometimes people think it means that you're a stuck-up bitch. And even if you're a guy, you still get the stuck-up bitch. They'll think that you're a bimbo. Sometimes people think all sorts of things based on a pretty face. And also, when people are attracted to you, like they are attracted to narcissists, they also attraction isn't always love. And that's the thing about a narcissist, teaches us awful lot about attention, is that just because you have it doesn't mean you also always want it. It doesn't mean that it's always kind when it's delivered towards you. Sometimes, because everyone is giving you attention, everything you do now becomes attention seeking. So you can see why Narcissus, he fucking hated people, man. He absolutely could not fucking stand people. And you can only imagine what kind of personality you end up developing if you're walking around hating people all the time. You're probably not the best person to hang around socially, unless people really get to know you. But then we have this girl, Echo. And Echo, she had done something earlier that really pissed off Hera, I think. It was either Aphrodite or Hera. I'm pretty sure she pissed off Hera, though. It was probably something that she was doing with Zeus. And so she cursed this bitch. It was because Echo was covering for Zeus in one of his affairs. I think that was it. And Hera was like, fuck you, bitch. You're going to have to echo back everything that somebody says to you. Because, that's what it was. She was over there telling Hera all sorts of fucking stories to distract her. And Hera was like, oh, this nymph, I like her. She's so cool. Then she realized this bitch is trying to distract me so that I can't see what Zeus is doing. That's fucked up. Like, that's fucked up. It was some real fucked up. She broke the girl code. So Hera was like, bitch, you're going to echo back. You can't speak anymore. You like to tell stories? Well, the only stories you're going to tell are the ones that people tell you. So fuck you, bitch. Not the best time for Echo. But she fell in love with Narcissus. And Narcissus was okay having her around for a little while because all she ever did was echo back everything that he said. So narcissist went into an echo chamber. You can imagine, first of all, what happens to you if you're not that bad. If you have a lot of aggression because you're always fighting off other people. You always have to justify your existence. You're always trying to get people to stop giving you attention or to give you attention for other reasons. You're probably not somebody who functions in society well. Narcissist was probably a people pleaser. And if he wasn't a people pleaser, he was aggressive to other people, which no, because people used to chase him around. They always wanted to be around him. So he was a performer. He always had to perform because he can't understand because everybody wants something from him. So he's trying to give them what they want in hopes that they'll give him what he wants, which is probably just to be loved. And they won't because they don't love him. They just want his pretty face. So he's a people pleaser and he has no idea. So everything he says to Echo, she echoes back to him. He's in an echo chamber about himself. He probably doesn't like himself very much. He doesn't. And Echo really kind of cements that because he doesn't have a different perspective in the world. He just has his echoed back to him. He doesn't like himself very much. And she echoes that back to him. So, he never falls in love with her because, like, literally, she just keeps echoing him back to himself. That's not attractive. And she, her poor little heart's broken. So she goes off into a cave somewhere to die. And that's where you get Cave's echo. Fucking crazy. And he ends up walking by a lake one day and he sees his face and he falls in love for the first time. For the first time, he sees himself and he falls in love because he thinks it's somebody else. Because it couldn't be him. That beautiful fucking face staring back, it couldn't be him. It absolutely no. So he can't leave the lake because this is the first time he's ever felt love. This is the first time he's ever felt loved. Seeing himself. But he's seeing himself in a reflection. And he doesn't even know it's him. He's fallen in love with a perception of him. He's fallen in love with the idea of him. And he doesn't even know it's him. Have you ever fallen in love with a dream that you've had? You ever fall in love with this idea of you being brave enough to do something that you loved, this, that, and the other, but you don't realize that it's you. That's why you were disappointed afterwards. That's why you woke up embarrassed. That's why you're like, oh, I can't say that. You ever ideate and have those dreams where you just say the right thing and you get the guy, you get the girl, you get them, whoever it is, you have this romance moving on in your head? Or you ever have these dreams where you get the job, you get the money, you get this, you get the notoriety, and you're like, oh, but then you're embarrassed afterwards. You're embarrassed because you didn't know that that's already you. You're seeing yourself, but you're embarrassed because you don't know it's you. You've heard people probably tell you some great things about yourself, but if you dismiss it all the time, or you don't recognize when people are saying things about you. In other words, the only thing you can hear are the things people echo back to you, the sentiments that you think and you see. This is the true disease of narcissism. You can't see or hear anything that anyone else is really saying. You can only see or hear what you think people are saying based off of what you think. You see the echo chamber? The echo chamber doesn't always happen just because someone literally repeats you. It happens because you only hear the things echoed in your own sentiment. You only take what resonates. You don't listen to people to understand them. That would be a healthy connection between Aries and the 7th house Libra. We only are listening to understand ourselves and to see ourselves and to see what we mean and this and that. And to one extent, it could be healthy, but to another extent, it is narcissism. Not only did narcissist who was not able to recognize himself, he thought it just was someone else projecting all of your qualities onto others. Anytime you've ever felt threatened by someone who's never actually said anything to you, projecting your insecurities onto others. Narcissism just so happened to project all of his best qualities onto the lake. Didn't recognize himself. But we do that with negative ones too occasionally. If you're somebody who really never thinks you're wrong, or you think you're somebody who's always wrong, It's always your fault somehow. You'll figure it out how it's your fault, even though everybody's like, it's not your fault. Stop. No, it is. Something's wrong with me. Yeah. That's also narcissism, the inability to see what is or to take in other perspectives. So with narcissists, oh, I have not even moved. I'm so sorry. These pictures are so cute too. Anyways, the personal outlook and first impressions. So with Narcissus, the story, he ends up dying by the lake, withering next and turning into a flower because he wasted away. And the concept here is when you can't recognize yourself, or in other words, when you don't socialize, get out enough. Because I like to say this, I wonder what would have happened if he left the lake and went to a different watering hole. Let's ponder for a second. If he left the lake and went to a different watering hole and looked into the lake, what would he have seen? Himself. Oh, gee, how'd that weird water nymph that never left the lake over on the south side get to the one on the east side? Oh, they didn't. And if he had gone to another water hole to test to see, is this me or is this something else? What would he have discovered? Again, himself. This is the scientific quest Narcissus did not go on to actually understand yourself. This is self-discovery. When you leave and go have new experiences in other places, you're able to better understand yourself because you have more experiences to compare from. So this is what gets us out of the narcissist stage. Everybody gets into a narcissist phase at some point in their life, based on any situation. Anytime you have some level of insecurity or you just don't see yourself properly, you're in a state of narcissism. And you won't even know it, to be totally honest. I mean, like, why would you know it? That defeats the whole purpose of it. So there are obviously lots of levels to it. And when we think about the concept, the mental health concept of narcissism, which can be difficult, this is why I say it's never good to go around diagnosing other people. Just diagnose yourself if you're that inclined. But definitely don't diagnose other people. Even if you see it and you're like, yeah, that's definitely it. You don't have to say shit out loud. Just kind of, recognize that it's not about you and set your own boundaries, remove yourself. But the thing about narcissism is you have no idea that you're doing it. You have no idea because you think it's not you. You think it's somebody else, or you see yourself and you can't recognize yourself, et cetera, et cetera. So the thing is the way that you stop that from happening, or a good way, I should say, of making sure it happens is to not grow. If you are growing, and this is the concept of personal outlook and first impressions, your first impression should not be your last one. It should be the first one, and you should continue on making impressions, just like the word impression. I want to pull in the concept from the Impressionist. If you look at the Impressionist period of art, all of the Impressionists, a lot of them would paint the exact same thing 30 different times. And that's the art you should be looking at. 30 paintings of the same thing painted at the same time every day, or painted at different times every day, because they wanted to see how different the same thing was to really understand light, and also how light hit structures, how light hit life, because this is an element of life, light. So, impressions. Your first impression should never be your last impression. You've got to keep making other impressions to actually know who you are. You've got to go out, get out, socialize with people. Go out, get out, and go have new experiences. Go to new places. Because that's going to tell you what is you and what isn't. Because you're going to have so many experiences to know the difference. And so that's the tale of narcissists. And I wanted to really hit on that because that's part of the first house. The first house, man, we're about to run into war with with Mars and all that kind of stuff. But the first house is way more than just how you get up and go. It's how you sit down and look at yourself. It's how you sit down and you look at yourself. And it's how you think about yourself with Athena. How do you think? Meaning, how are you actually thinking? Not what do you think about yourself, but how are you thinking about yourself? What is your mindset? Because if you don't have the right mindset, how can you win? You don't play games without going into a mindset first. Are you going into mindset to win? Because that's different than going into a mindset to have fun. What is your mindset? And Narcissus says, and how do you look at yourself? What experience have you had for you to be able to actually look at yourself? If you only had one experience in life, if you only ever done one thing in life, or you do the same thing over and over for an extended period of time, you stop being able to see yourself because you become part of the mundane background. And hence Narcissus wasting away and turning into a flower. He turned into literally the backdrop. He became part of the setting. It's like turning into an NPC. That's why a lot of people say, when someone is being a narcissist, it's kind of eerie. It's like the uncanny valley, because they're being very strange, because they're settling into the background when they're supposed to be alive and moving through it, but acting and performance and all that kind of stuff, because they're so busy thinking not about how they're thinking, but they're thinking about how people are perceiving them, which is the narcissist thing. So let's move on to some personalities in the body. Ooh, okay. We have some more Greeks to go over. I totally forgot about them. I don't know why, because this is like one of my favorite stories. But this is Eros and Psyche. Let me find them really quick. We also have the Golden Fleece and the Argonauts. Oh my god. Okay. Where is Eros and Psyche? Maybe that's further down. Give me 2 seconds to see where I'm at. I hate my notes right now. They're so ugly, and it's so difficult to see where I'm at. Anyways, let's look at the initiatives, or new initiatives, the body and personality. So this aspect, this is going to be really short. In this story with Jason, the Argonauts, I think Jason, or the guy who went to go get the golden fleece. Anyways, Jason, he went on a journey to go get the golden fleece, because he was supposed to be king of something, but like his stepmom or stepdad or somebody, they like took the throne from him. And to prove that he deserved the throne, he had to go on an adventure to do something mighty fucking impossible. Something that, like, I think the golden fleece was given to a king. It was one of Zeus's kids, because Hera was pissed again because he was fucking around and having kids, and he had to send down the ram and the golden fleece to go save them and take them somewhere, and they became like kings, and like ruled and stuff like that. And then the ram went back up to Mount Olympus and died, because it sacrificed himself. And I wanted to mention that sacrifice and also new initiatives. So with the golden fleece, this ram that is made of gold fleece, like the ram was had gold fur or whatever, and that's what the fleece was made out of, and given to, I think, the kid that did it. I don't fucking remember, but the golden fleece is just they sheared the ram, because they sacrificed him. He lived out his tale, and they turned the fleece into something that is worthy of this sacred sense. And so Jason wanted it so he could go be king at his home, and that's what ended up happening. They ended up doing it. They did a lot of obstacles and stuff. And so one thing I want to mention about sacrifice with the ram, I asked myself, it's kind of crazy that animals always get sacrificed in like everything. That's kind of fucked up. And I thought, especially after going on such a cool fucking mission, like, how are you going to be like, ram, you've got to go on this mission and save my kids from my crazy wife, who's not actually crazy. She's just pissed and a bit misdirected. And then like the ram comes back and he's like, okay, time for you to die. But that is essentially how we kind of send off agents in our life. And the agents in our life are the quests that we go on, the goals that we have, the inspiration that gets us from point A to point B. You don't set a goal and then live that entire goal for the rest of your life. You've seen people who do that, and their goal was to be quarterback, and they're like 55 talking about how they made quarterback back when their senior year. Like, that is somebody holding on to the ram. Okay, they will not let the ram die. And the thing is, with the concept of sacrifice, and especially animal, is it's our animal nature. An animal is the most primitive form of you. It is the most primordial form of you. And so when you send off a primordial aspect of you, you're going to gather up all of this energy and go towards a quest, go towards a goal. Once you achieve it, you have to let that aspect of you die. You have to let it go so you can go on and do other things. And that's kind of why I wanted to cover a lot of these animals and stuff like that get sacrificed, because it seems, you have to think about it metaphorically, because when we look at it physically, it seems just a bit wildly brutal, and it doesn't really make any sense. But with Jason and the Argonauts, I kind of want to go over this idea, is when like the concept of that quest. So the ram itself is the epitome of that, right? Jason and the Argonauts are doing exactly what the ram did. They are going on a quest. There are many obstacles that they will face. There were many, they had to be smart, they had to be ingenuitive. In other words, they had to go out and actually try something for once, fail and fail upwards, because failing upwards is just when you don't stop until you succeed. That's the only way to fail upward. Oh, okay. Besides the people who fail upwards due to privilege and nepotism, which arguably all of these mythos characters have because they are led and protected by the gods. But we too can have that type of privilege if you have spiritual wealth. And having spiritual wealth is something that you accumulate within yourself. So it has access to everybody. Unlike physical wealth, which is passed down generationally in the physical realm, spiritual wealth can be accumulated, occurred, and it does also pass down through generations. You just must seek, and it, you shall find it. So that being said, we all have a bit of spiritual privilege if only you know how to access it. And the thing of the story of Jason and the Argonauts is going to access that spiritual wealth, going to access what is rightfully yours. And by doing that, we have to be ingenuitive, we have to be cunning, we have to believe in ourselves, we have to step out on faith. So if you look at one of those stories and you read about it, that's going to tell you an awful lot about, in the first house, initiative. I'm taking the initiative, and what type of personality you have to have. You have to be willing to be the person who says, I'm going to go do it. And that's the Aries aspect. That's the Mars aspect. That's the first house aspect, is the I am. I am who is going to go do it. I am who is getting it done. I am. I did it. And that and that's it. Oh, you did it. Yeah. And now I'm doing something else. Can we talk about what you did? No, because I'm busy doing something now. I am. It's that I am always. I am. I'm facing it. I'm going after it. And then once the mission is done, I sacrifice that part of myself. I let it go so that I can be again. And that's the aspect of sacrifice. In a lot of cultures, there's this concept of sacrifice. And, through the Christian lens, they're always, when they sacrifice people, they put them on crosses. It's wild. It's wild. It's, I'm like, don't ever let me be some type of prophet. And then I get put on a cross and people start putting up on their walls my dead body hanging with my boobs. That's insane. Poor Jesus. He's walking around in a loincloth in people's fucking living rooms, hanging up on walls and stuff. In his worst moment, where everybody has to, in the shame moment, not his shame, but everybody else's shame for having put him there. Like, come on, there's so many other ways. There's so many other ways. At least you can put him on an idol. You don't have to be in the way, like that one. So all I'm saying is, when it comes to sacrifice, the Christians have a very strange way of going about expressing understanding and doling that out under the context of colonization. So it's important to recognize that in a lot of cultures and mythologies, sacrifice is an energetic or a way of saying letting go and allowing the rebirth process to happen, not necessarily just murking people. And also, that being said, in every other culture and religion, there are terrible people who misinterpret the messages to gain personal power. So, you're going to find it everywhere. It's not just the Christians, it's everybody else. But it just so happens to be that Christianity, as a majority, seems to kind of operate in that way, which is a little wild. But after all that to be said, I want to move on to interactions with other houses. I think Psyche and Eros are down further in the story. And if not, we'll chat about it another time. Also, there's a bit of Hercules in this as well. I don't want to say if you watch the Disney movie, you're good, because that's not the case. Hercules actually was pretty fucked up. I think he killed his wife. He did a lot of fucked up shit, and he had to redeem himself. And so the act of redeeming himself, he had to literally become an entirely new person. And it's the concept of redemption happens in the first house. Who you are when you must redeem yourself is in that first house. And depending on the zodiac sign that you have in that first house is kind of the storyline of redemption that you may go through. When it comes to Aries, the storyline of redemption is Hercules, because Hercules is the brute force. This is when you have to redeem yourself through doing acts of good, doing acts of goodwill, doing. And so, like, it might be different when it comes to other astrological signs. Like if it's in Taurus, your first house, your act of redemption may be in sowing the fields, spreading the seeds. And I'm part of my first house is Aries, but also I have some Taurus in there, depending on like the kind of astrology that you follow. And so for me, any type of act of redemption, I always know when I just do it. I spread seeds around of goodwill and good faith with the universe. I just do acts of kindness naturally to kind of give myself some some leeway. No, it's not like, I do acts of kindness so that way if I fuck up and do something mean, it goes against my good credit. It's not necessarily that, but also kind of. It's more of, when you do acts of redemption, you are less likely to do acts of condemnation. So if you do something wrong, like I remember when I was in high school once, I had a friend. He was great. There obviously was maybe something there between us a little bit more, and I was young. I'm like 14, and like, just terrible at romance. Anyways, we ended up kind of splitting apart. My school had like 4,000 kids. So you can imagine we're not always in the same place at the same time in the same classes. And I remember I ended up meeting somebody else, and, he reminded me so much of him. And one day I told him, yeah, I replaced you. It was just a joke. And he did not take it as a joke, probably because his feelings were a lot deeper than even mine were. And because I was very repressing the concept that there would be feelings between us, because I didn't even think it would be a thing. I definitely hurt his feelings really fucking bad, to the point where he didn't talk to me for 3 fucking years. I mean, we had my senior year, we had a class, and sometimes we sat next to each other and just pretended like the other person didn't exist. It was a mess. Like, talk about somebody who's holding a grudge for a very long time. Anyways, I spent the rest of my life doing acts of redemption in that area, just essentially because I wanted to redeem myself in that space. I always told myself I would never ever like joke in that regard, especially in a place where making a joke out of insecurity, or making a joke so that I could lessen my fears of rejection or whatever, I would never do something like that. I remember I went really hardcore for a while. I would just face my insecurities hard. Like, fuck, it didn't matter what my insecurity was. I was going to face it in the most worst embarrassing, not the most embarrassing way, but I was just head on, like, not even letting my insecurities fuck with me ever again, because I hurt somebody that I really cared about so deeply. And I mean, I look back on it now. We were kids, and it was not that intense, but it still was, you know what I mean? Because feelings were involved. But when I look at that, the active redemption of saying, I'm not going to ever let my insecurities get the best of me ever again for any reason. Well, now when I do stuff like that, it's like spreading goodwill. Even though I may not actually, it's like you have the option to act in insecurity or to face it and not act in insecurity. When you face it and you don't, you are spreading pieces of goodwill because you were acting in good faith. And so therefore the other person is experiencing something well or something good from you in that regard. So therefore you are redeeming yourself even when you did not cause something to be redeemed by. And does it add for you in the future? Who the fuck knows? I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. But it does, I will say, it does make it easy for you to stand on your character when you have a lot of acts of good faith. And you know that you do that for a reason, your resolve. So that Hercules, that is the Aries version of it, the brute force. Mine mine was a little different. It was, sowing good faith. That's a Taurus thing, the bull. But it's going to be different for every kind of zodiac sign in the first house. I think with Pisces, there's a bit of repentance that comes in there. There's a lot of Jesus archetypes in the Pisces space, so there's a lot there. But it's different for everyone, and we'll probably, to some degree, talk about that at some point in time. We have 15 minutes left. And I'm just getting to Mars. I am just going to keep going and have the whole thing recorded. So when people got to go, you guys can just go ahead and drop out at any point in time. It's just best for me to get all of this down for the recording. But with Mars, we talk about Mars being the ruling planet of the first house. What does that mean? Well, at the beginning, when we went into our door, right, we went into the door of Mars, or the planet of Mars. And Mars is, if you think about it, let's move down here to the essence of the first house under Mars. Mars is vibrant energy. Mars is boldness. If you think of Mars as a physical planet, as the actual space, what it looks like, we're going to get into that. You're going to be able to really concrete the image in your mind, but I want you to think in color, in tones of rust, red. Think in terms of mountains. Think in terms of so dry that there is no life, there is no water, there is no life. It's so dry, but it's so hot, so dry and also hot that there's sparks can happen at any point in time. Something can happen at any point in time, but it's something without that emotion attached to it. So let's look at Let me see. I think I have a bit of a story here. Oh, that's right. I missed the Eros and the Psyche, but we don't have to talk about that. Eros and Psyche's in there. That's for another time. I'm sure Eros and Psyche comes up all the time. It'll come up now. In fact, I'll just mention it. Mars is also a very, like, think Aries in terms of not the zodiac sign, but the Greek god. He's in love with Aphrodite, and he's also, this massive war god. So there's two sides to the coin. You can have anger, you can have boldness that is brash and that calls for blood, or you can have that boldness that is brash that calls for passion, that calls for bold statements of love, that forward and directness that comes in romance. Most of my favorite romances are when people are direct. I can't stand passive romance. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. Well, let's just see what it is by what it is, and maybe we'll accidentally fall in love with each other over time, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this is the most platonic thing I've ever seen in my life. Whenever it's bold, or you notice a lot of people tend to romantically ship people, the most shipped type of archetypes are people who are very bold with each other. And it doesn't mean that they always like each other. People ship people who hate each other all the time simply because they're so direct with each other. I mean, the fanfics always, stuff gets toxic even sometimes. But that's kind of the point, is Mars is also representative in that space of, like, it is both hot, like anything could happen at any time, and that could be something violent or something passionate. Let me scroll in my notes a little bit. I'll give these slippers. Oh my goodness. I have so many notes on Hercules. Okay, so we're going to look at oh, I do want to mention this. Mars is very much Aries. I exist. When you talked about that primordial force of the ram and stuff like that, that I exist, I am, that is Martian energy. It's so intense, but it's so beautiful. But it's also your drive and your survival instincts. I want to say, in terms of okay, I'm going to bring up, this is kind of twofold between here and the next slide, which is the scientific aspects of Mars. When we talk about drive and survival instincts, Mars, there's a story about Mars when he got captured by two giants. Why the giants were going around capturing a god, I don't know. Beyond me. But they thought that they could challenge him, and he was the god of war, and they caught him. They did, and they kept him, I think, for like 13 months or something like that. And eventually, Hermes, maybe it was because of Zeus or not, but Hermes, or Mercury, found a way to help him escape. Now, remember, Mercury is all about information, right? He's quick and he's fast, and he's also intelligent. That's that Athena type energy. Of course, if Mars can't escape with brute force, he must escape through intelligence. And so there's kind of that repeat. Mars and Mercury, they go really well together. Honestly, I'm a mercurial Martian, so to speak. I've got Aries, but I've also got my Mercury in the first house, and I've got my Mars in Gemini. It's a mess of hot air and fire up in here, but it's all about being curious. I want to say it's the stuff that makes heist novels. Mercury and Mars, they're a great pair in the way that you can say a heist novel is a great time. Depends on how you feel about the heist. You know what I'm saying? A little bit of moral ambiguity in the air. A little bit of will they, won't they get caught or get put in jail because this is insane or not. Maybe they're Robin Hood, who knows? Or maybe they just like stealing shit and getting over on other fucking people because they get to flex their gambling addiction in a different way. That's Mercury and Mars when they're together. My poison is knowledge, so it's a nice one. It's nice to be addicted to learning stuff and sharing information because it's always a good time. Reading a book is a nice way to spend my day instead of, inside a jail cell. I'm just going to say that. But that survival instinct, the ability to stay put, the ability not to panic, the ability to bide your time, resilience. is what comes from Mars. Whenever you've been in a space, and maybe everybody's experienced this to some degree, if you've ever been in a job that you can't fucking stand, you don't like, but you bid your time until you could get out, if you were in a situation with your family or living situation or a relationship where you bid your time until you could strike, until you could move, until you could get out, until you could do something, that's the resilience and the survival instinct of Mars. Now, when we get into the scientific aspects, we can look at the fact that Mars is red. That's an obvious one. We also looked at the aspect of the dryness of Mars. There is no water that we know of specifically on Mars, and also I think that Mars is also fairly cold. Which speaks to the it's farther from the sun, so it's a bit colder, I think, than Earth. Which I want to say, I don't know. Maybe I should Google that. I'm not going to. I'm lazy. But if it's not cold, then admit this information. But if it is, Mars being a bit cold kind of speaks to the emotional aloofness. And now, my Mars is in, or my moon is in Capricorn, so I know an awful lot about like holding on to, I want to say, the ability to encompass and to hold emotion. It's a very Capricorn thing. That's why Capricorn is both the goat and the fish. It's opposite of Cancer. It's the ability. It's like that dark cave that holds big, deep, deep pools of water that's so black you're terrified to put your toe in because you know what the fuck is in there, or if you'll get sucked in, or if you'll end up in some, you don't know what's going to go on in that cave. It's spelunking in caves. That's, cave diving is what they call it. That's Capricorn energy. So that's really deep. But that Mars energy is like the coldness of Mars is the ability to not even feel any of that. It's a deep cave, black, cold, deep water. Whatever, I'll go in. I don't care. I'm not scared. And there are people who literally could look at you and say that, and they actually fucking mean it. And that's the coldness of Mars. That's the coldness of I could be so sometimes detached from my emotions and the emotions of others, not necessarily because I cannot feel them, but because I'm not ruled by them. And the reason why Mars is not necessarily ruled by emotions in the same way that other people and other entities and other planets can be is because it's got two moons, and these two moons were named after Aries with Aphrodite's sons, Phobos and Deimos, I think. Deimos. And this is panic or terror and fear. This is psychological terror. His emotions are psychological terror, but they're his sons, which means he gives people psychological terror. So therefore, why would he ever be terrorized by anything? Mars, and bringing that Mars energy into battle or into any place, that type of anger, it is psychological terror. A lot of people sometimes, especially in my earlier years, and in my 20s, people would say that I was intimidating, or they were scared of me. And I couldn't figure out why, because I'm the most friendliest person in the world. I personally don't see it. And, a lot of people who know me really well are like, oh, people are just, you got to ignore people like that because obviously there's something, they've got something that they're hiding to some degree. And I'm like, no, I don't understand why people would call me intimidating ever, until I, really got to know myself and my energy. And then I realized, oh, it's because of my sheer ability to psychologically terrorize people. And I recognize, I don't do that to people that that I'm neutral with and or have positive feelings for. I only psychologically terrorize people who annoy the fuck out of me. And I mean they're annoying me on purpose. If someone, I've told you, I've been called a bimbo or treated as a bimbo many different times in my life. And I'm talking about the kind of treatment where you think maybe it's me projecting onto other people, and then they turn around and say something or do something incredibly offensive that they would never do to anyone else under any of the same circumstances. Yes. That's when I love to psychologically terrorize people and remind them to leave me the fuck alone, because I miss nothing. It's the Athena energy as well. Athena and Mars both together will use psychological terror and warfare, fear, all of those things. And the only way that you can do that to people is if you can withstand terror and panic and fear. And it just so happens to be that, I could be a great, first responder because I'm very calm in situations that other people find themselves unable to withstand. And it's simply because I don't know what it is. It just must be the Aries energy. It's the fire that burns everything away except for what is. And what is isn't your thoughts, your fears, and your emotions about a thing. It's just the thing. So, if somebody's, going through a very horrific situation, all sorts of fucked up stuff everywhere, and people are screaming and panicking, all I can see is what is happening. In other words, what is the most important thing in that moment, and what is the next step? Initiative. And so that can be really disturbing to some and to many others, especially when you do it as a child and people think that you're supposed to be in shock or having all of these, different thoughts and feelings or, this, that, and the other, and you don't. They find it unnerving and they think you're so. They think that there's something strange with you. And it's like, I'm not strange. I'm just not terrorized by things, because this emotion is something that I am innately sitting in all the time. And in order to function in my entire life, I have to be able to, organize that emotion, that feeling, which is why my fears don't scare me. I see them and I recognize them as things to conquer instead, because it's a game between me and that emotion. But Aries, of course, he would never see his children, Phobos and Deimos, terror and fear. He would never see them as ugly things. They may be the kind of kids that only a parent could love, but Aries is that parent who loves them. He plays with them. He doesn't think that they're bad. Meanwhile, everybody else is like, oh my God, what these fuckers? These are from the spawn of the devil. One of them probably just sits and watches you sleep, stares deeply into your eyes and says troubling things. Meanwhile, Aries is like, oh my God, they're growing. And that's how I kind of feel. It's a thing. So I really wanted to bring that up because the energy of terror and fear. So in other words, everybody, I know that you guys are in the book club, and we kind of went over, this is for everybody else to know, because not everybody was at the book club, but we went over the fact that we're going to keep doing Women Who Run Wild with Wolves for the next month or two, or however long we need to go through these stories. And one of the first stories in the book is Bluebeard. And Bluebeard is, in essence, psychological terror. Psychological terror and fear, and how to overcome it. That is the story that tells you how to deal with these two kids, how to turn them, instead of into your psychological terrors, turn them into your huntsmen, essentially. I mean, I wouldn't say that the story teaches you how to do that necessarily, but it does set you on the path to be able to turn your own Bluebeard into a huntsman who works for you. But you have to first become the wild woman, or you first have to be able to tame or self-master the chaos that is you, the chaos magic. You have to be a chaos magician who's not like unhinged, in other words. And then you can feel these energies, and instead of being ruled by it and acting in it, you can see it for what it is and start turning them onto, I turn them onto my enemies. I always tell my psychological terrors, I always put them to work. Oh, fuck no. Here's a good tip. Anytime my own personal Bluebeard comes around, I say things like, oh, I must be making money while I sleep tonight. Because if anybody pulls on my energy, whether it's positive or negative, I'm making money while I sleep. That's the rule. That's the rule between me and the universe. Don't send it unless it's also going to send me some coins along with it. I don't give a fuck whether it's positive or negative at this point. Because you know what? If I can make up the rules of anything, then why not? So I use that. And if that energy comes towards me, also what comes towards me are ideas or opportunities for me to make money while I sleep. And it's brilliant because all I have to do is choose not to act in fear or to act with that feeling of psychological terror and panic and all that kind of stuff. Instead of acting in that energy, I turn my attention. And if I turn my attention, guess what's also there? The money, the opportunity. So I turn my attention, an idea pops up, I do that instead, and boom, something new happens. It's wild. It happens to me all the time. It's the most it's some brilliant shit, I'm not gonna lie. I recommend it 10 out of 10. Here's some interactions with other zodiac signs with Mars energy. So Mars in a fire sign amplifies the fire. I love hanging out with Sagittarius and Leo energy. Oh my God, we are also other Aries energy. When I tell you, we become psychic fiends. You do not want to be around me and other fire signs. We are eternal children. We turn into our inner childs immediately, and we are the rulers. We are gods. We are unstoppable. Nothing can say. It's insane. I fucking love it. I love the energy, but also it has led me down some some very interesting situations and scenarios. So while I love the energy, one does have to know when to stop the train before it goes off the tracks, and one has learned that lesson. So with earth signs, fire and earth is like the epitome of taking a clay pot and turning it into a ceramic tile. You get what I'm saying? A ceramic piece. It solidifies. This is when you take all of that energy and you turn it into something. This is when you take your passion and you work on it. This is an artist painting. This is an author writing a book. This is a musician like making music. This is passion turned into something physical. And with air signs, man, I love me some air signs too. Oh my god, talk about being titillated. But that is because of the Mars and Gemini thing. I totally love. It's like going down rabbit holes. It's like being in Alice in Wonderland. Me and air signs, we just are swimming for days in the mental space, also in the metaphysical space. I've also had some really wild imaginative things that I've been able to do with air sign. It's insane. The fire in the air is amazing, and that is essentially when you have the ability to it's like if the fire signs get together and they amplify, fire and air gets together and it fucking explodes. And that explosion can be detrimental or it can be productive. It really depends. And that's why it's really important to pay attention when fire and air are together, because you really have to act with intention. Intention is 1,000% extremely important here. With fire and fire, it's more like wrangling children and making sure they don't get too wild. But with fire and air, it's like intention. This is a hot air balloon. You can go somewhere, or this is a fucking explosion and you've killed hundreds of people. So which one is it? Be mindful. That's what the air aspect is there. And that's why, like Athena, and here's the aspect of Athena. Athena always wins. So we have to be mindful while using Athena energy. What are we winning at? You have to really know your intent, really know your purpose, because you're going to win. The thing is if you don't know what you're winning, if what you're winning is an illusion, and the truth of it is that you're going to win the worst prize in the fucking world. Maybe you're going to win the most notorious person to ever have lived and everybody hates you for the like in perpetuity. Yeah, you can win that award too. So it's really important to make sure you pay attention to intention when it comes to fire and air, and pay attention when it comes to if you're a fire sign and you are with an air sign, intention, be intentional with them, have intention, that kind of a thing. Or if you're just working with the elements, which we'll talk about in another course. And then fire and water, when we talk about Mars with water. Now Mars, and this is a very pleasurable place. This turns into like scorpionic energy, where anything can happen, and it's warm and it's cozy, and it's when I say scorpionic, because Scorpios can be seemingly kind of cold, they also are extremely fucking passionate, if you know what I'm saying. Like that's the house of dominatrix. If Mars can bring passion to things, Scorpio brings the dominatrix aspect to things, where things get very kinky, very hot, very sensual, very you're safe, but like we're gonna ride the edge very fast. And the reason for that, I do want to mention, is Mars used to also represent and be the planet that ruled Scorpio before Pluto. And the thing of that is if you think about Mars in retrograde versus Mars when it's direct or traveling direct, when it's traveling direct, it's close. When it's in retrograde, it's hit the oval. Like the orbits aren't circles, they're ovals. So it's hit the far end and it's going out so far that it looks like it's going backwards. And that's kind of the concept of a retrograde, which means not only is that energy going to hit us at a wider angle, but it's also going to hit us at a delay. And so it's also farther away from the sun, so it's colder still. It's even colder than what it was. And so that takes Mars from Aries to its retrograde or its more reflective partner, Hades, the ruler of the underworld. If Mars rules anger, passion, all of that kind of stuff, bold and initiative, then Hades rules patience, quiet, stillness, the dark. if Aries is the light. And so that's that kind of retrograde aspect. But Pluto rules there, but Mars still has those aspects too. So Mars with water is kind of like take Aries any day. He's blazing in on a hot fire sword on a horse really fast. And then, with water, he turns into Hades. Still very charismatic. And I mean, like, think of Hades from, you can even think about him from the Disney film. That guy is very charismatic. He was a good time. But, I love Lore Olympus. So if you think of Hades, like the Lore Olympus from that webtoon, it's amazing. Because I'm a sucker for romance. I'm the sucker for a Hades and a Persephone story. Tell me about it. But I also love the retelling and the myths seen through the perspective of the author. But it's that kind of energy. It's someone who is charismatic, someone who takes care of what is in their possession. See, that's the kind of thing. Hades can also be, or I should say Aries or the Mars energy can be possessive. To go to war over something means you feel like you own, so you're entitled to something, right? Victory in some way, shape, or form. But this is, I take care of my possession. In water. So with water, you have more emotional depths. And that's because, the Mars planet is usually very dry. There is no life. So that water brings life to it. That water is, it's like Aries is a bachelor and Hades is daddy. He has life. He has a family now. So he's a bit more settled in. He's not wild like he used to be. This is the actual evolved like sense of that hothead energy where everybody wishes the hothead could grow up, and if only he grew up, his potential is so amazing. If only he could just put his head on his shoulders, right? Well, when Mars puts his head on his shoulders, gets a little bit of water in his cup, he's swell. I mean, he's still got some of those some fucked up kind of habits, you know what I mean? Like the possession thing, we got to talk about it. The control thing, we got to talk about it. Like he just put all of his energy at home. That's why Aphrodite kicks him out half the time, because they go back and forth, because it's hot and it's passionate, and then he turns into Daddy Warbucks here, and and then all of his focus is at home, and now he's trying to conquer everything at home, so she's to kick him out of the fucking house again. And it's that back and forth. That's the control aspect that happens when you look at the Scorpio energy, which is like air. It's like the Mars with water, and that. But we'll jump into Scorpio a lot more when we get to the 8th house. Let's hop into. I'm gonna check on everybody really quick in the chat. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. Oh no, is the audio still going in and out? I don't know. Oh no. How's the audio now? Okay, I'm going to pop out. Okay. How's this? Okay, so now let's get back into the zodiac sign of Aries, and this is this one's going to go really fast, simply because Aries encompass so much of what we talked about with the Ram story, the Golden Fleece. Aries is initiation, and Aries is also having a quest. It's the initiative. It's Athena. Aries is a culmination of all of this stuff. It's a combination of all of everything that we've gone over so far. And it's the let me see jump to the project. Yeah, Aries is, it's the ram, the story about the golden fleece, where the ram goes out. It knows it's going to get sacrificed. Aries knows that it's going to start something and that it may not finish it. And by that I mean it may not stick around. It's starting is its job. It's its job to go and do a thing and then come back and then get rebirth. Its job isn't always to do the full gambit, is what I'm saying. Its job isn't to live after it does its initial thing. Its job is to go and attack a goal, be the first one, and to clear a path. And that's its job. Now, that being said, the sense of self, it kind of exists that way if you experience, if you've ever experienced adapting a new mindset. Okay, if you've changed your lifestyle, some people it could be health, some people it could be like their weight, some people it could be new endeavors, hobbies, a new challenge, whatever it is, family matters, it doesn't matter. Whatever you change in a lifestyle, right? Whenever you adopt a new mindset, your sense of self seems super important at first because you are building and constructing a new foundation that is you. That's Aries doing all the work. The Emperor card, if you were in the tarot classes, comes here. The Fool, stepping out and going to do something. But there comes a point where where all of that shit becomes mundane. You adopt and you integrate everything. You set off for a goal. You meet the goal, and now that's old to you. You've integrated it. Your sense of self seems to disappear a bit, and now you're playing a role until you get a new calling to do something else. And so that's the ram having set you off on a path. You accomplish it. The ram, or that initial inspiration, then is sacrificed, or it leaves. You let go of it, and it goes back into the ether of sorts. And then eventually you get a new calling, you get a new itch again, you get inspired, you don't like the things the way they are anymore, and you want to change something again. So there's a new ram coming. That's Aries again. That's spring. Aries is spring. When the change, the dead becomes alive, and then what is alive grows. Aries lets it go so it can grow. And then as something dies again, and then spring, it comes alive again. You get the point. So that's that. When we get into elemental power, fire, we've been discussing this entire time, so this one's going to go pretty fast too. But the element of fire, and I'm gonna do a whole course on working with elements in the physical world and also the metaphysical, and how that works on the 4 different planes: spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. But here, just to give a quick glimpse of it, this is spiritual power. When I said the ram, Aries, that ram represents the fire element of the spark that grows. Fire represents that on a physical level. We see its movement. We see how fire fire comes from nothing, comes from friction, the heat and the dryness going together really fast. Anything could happen if this keeps rubbing together really fast in this dry element. Boom, something. It's something from nothing. That's the fire element. A thought, a feeling, a creation, an idea, all of that. These are sparks of inspiration, so to speak. And so there's a lot of vitality when you nurture it. So I don't know if anybody watches Survivor. I watched all 40 something seasons when I was pregnant, and then after when I gave birth for 2 months. I was on the couch watching Survivor, just surviving my second, kid. And the thing is, everyone wants to learn how to make fire. It's so important. But part of making fire isn't just getting the spark. It's nurturing it into a steady flame, and then letting that build into a foundation that will burn. And it won't just stop burning. You keep feeding it and feeding it and feeding it, and you take care of it. And that is the element of fire. When you recognize your ideas and how to feed them and take care of them, you don't overfeed them, you don't overdo it, you don't underfeed them. There's a natural flow and a natural rhythm, and the only way you can learn that is by doing, by trying, putting it out, trying it again, starting over. You just never give up. The resolve to be able to tame the fire and keep that steady burn is a lesson in itself. And that's how you stoke the fire of creativity, and you get to know your soul because you feed it. And this is there are many different lessons in this. In indigenous medicine and so on, the Aboriginals used to share fire as a way of having community with each other. The different clans would literally transfer fire. They would send out, some kids or, some adults to go take fire to the other clan for the night. So they share fire. And this is a way of sharing that love and that creativity, that spark with each other, the way of acknowledging the nurturing of community, the nurturing of relations. But also you have the wolf story. There are 2 wolves, right? One of them is evil and one of them is good. Which one do you feed? And the concept is, well, whichever you feed is the one that's the biggest. Oh, I fucked it up. The thing is, which one's the biggest? And the answer is the one you feed. Well, the point is that you should be feeding all your wolves. Don't just feed the good ones. Also feed the ones that are bad, or I should say acknowledge them. Don't starve them. Don't starve them of attention, so to speak. Give it attention to acknowledge it so that you can repurpose it. Because that wolf is up to no, that wolf that's bad is the wolf that's getting into the hen house. It's the wolf that, when you think about your pets or your dog, when you have a dog that's getting into stuff, you don't starve it to death. You give it something else to do. You give it a job. You recognize that this dog is hyperactive, so it needs something. So your creativity is neither good nor bad. You just have creativity that is either doing something that it shouldn't and needs to be repurposed, or creativity that is working in your favor. And so what you feed it is important. You feed the one in your favor something that keeps it going, and you feed the other one a new activity. You feed it something different. So there's that. So fire is all about that. And then we talk about emotional power. And this slide, let me see, interacts with that. But I talked a little bit about that with the Mars. I kind of went through that, so we don't need to go that through here. But let's talk about emotional power. Emotional power here, just really quick. When I talked about the sensuality between like Aphrodite and Mars, for instance, emotional power is that sensual drive. So the act of creation. This is sexual energy for the most part. When we talk about emotional power or emotional fire, the fire is in the emotional realm. Oftentimes that does come up in the sacral chakra or even the solar plex chakra. When it's in the solar plex, usually it's anger. When it's in the sacral, usually it's passion or creativity. And I will say that there is something to be said about developing a sexuality with yourself to understand that you are more than a sexual object. Sex is the act of creation, not the physical act of intercourse, so to speak. So while you're creating, that feeling that you may get of the orgasmic feeling, you can get that while exercising, you can get that while creating something. That orgasmic feeling doesn't necessarily need to relate to sex. It's just that most people think orgasm, so sex, instead of thinking this orgasmic feeling, good, instead of sex. When you are taught to tie your feeling with an activity, that doesn't mean that the activity is what the feeling is is about. The feeling can be tied to any activity, and nurturing that, knowing that means that you can then understand how you're relating to that emotion and what activities you're doing, what's going on around you. Obviously, do that in a healthy and appropriate way. And then we've got mental power. So this is when you feed fire with air. And this is when you're feeding your ideas. This is when you have ideas or you're ruminating. When you add anger to rumination, that can be very unhealthy for you. Or when you add passion to rumination, it can be unhealthy. You get the difference between a delusion that fuels your self-righteousness and a delusion that fuels your strange limerence for a person. I don't know if anybody has seen on TikTok, sometimes people, like, when you form a parasocial relationship with someone and you have a huge crush on someone you've never met in your life, you feel like there's just this connection between you two, and maybe they like one of your photos or something like that, and you're like, it means something. That's limerence. That's fire feeding imagination. It's just your imagination's going wild in one degree or the other. So like I said before, it's really important to pay attention to your intent and your purpose. If you're going to feed your ideas, for what purpose and what intent? If you know your purpose and your intent, then you can always direct that fire energy in the right way. You can focus it, you can hone it, you can nurture it in the correct way that feeds your intent. But again, it's important to know the purpose behind your intent and the impact and all of that kind of stuff, and to take your time and to really know what you're doing, because not all intent ends well. They say the road to hell is paved with good intent. So there's that. And then we've got physical, or when we add fire to that earth element. This is when you create, this is how you can create societies. This is a visionary with an idea of a green city, and then all of a sudden now we have laws and order and ordinances and parks being built and trees being planted and greenery hanging off of apartment buildings and greenscapes on the roofs and greenscapes everywhere you go. Now all of a sudden the city is full of greenery, and people are breathing better. The city is cooler than it usually was. You have all of these great impacts. This is fire hitting earth and physical energy, physical power. This is taking a vision and then working it through from all the way through down to the physical plane. This is when a vision is manifested. And so that is kind of the wrap up of the first house. So what I want to kind of go back to before I have everybody, before we open up for questions and before I let everybody go, is back to this door. And in this door, you just experienced, and you can even go back and rewatch this in the recording as many times as you need to. you just experienced an entire realm that has stories on it. And I just told you all these different types of stories and the kinds of things that you find there. And this can be accessed through the first house. I would advise people to go back and listen to this to some degree at some point in time in your life as you're studying astrology, because what you want to do is you want to relate these stories to your life. If you can see it in your own life, you can see it in your own physicality, then you create totems behind this door. And this door will be secured in your psyche and it will never leave. Anytime those totem moments come up for you, this door swings open and you're brought right back to Mars. And you know exactly that you were in the fire element. You know that Athena is somewhere, that Mars is somewhere, that the ram is somewhere. You know that, Hercules, that with the whole redemption arc and the brute force of doing, you know that all of these stories exist in that space. And then you can identify where you are. Who are you right now and what story are you in? And that'll tell you exactly how to navigate whatever you're in. And that's how we use this. Now, that being said, when we're in Aries season right now, so I do recommend that everybody take, and this doesn't matter what season you're in necessarily, you can do this, but journal every day just how, and reflect, maybe in the mornings and the evenings, reflect on this energy, reflect on this fire energy, how it's coming up in your life. You see a fire walking down the street and you see a picture of a fire, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's related in even the tiniest of bit, pay attention to it and ask yourself how. Ask yourself what. It does not matter what the answers are. There's no right or wrong answers. It doesn't matter. What matters is you're attuning yourself to the symbols, to the energy, and then whenever you are, as you're going along your path, you'll be able to pick up on that stuff so much faster. You'll be in a conversation and you will feel this shift to the first house where your sense of self, all of a sudden your armor goes up and you know that you're in front of an opponent and you feel like Athena. You'll just know that you're in the story immediately because all the signs will have hit you. And it happens all the time for me. But remember this door and meditated on it often. Make a playlist that when you're feeling your most badass self and your most confident, this, that, and the other, something that really fires you up. Make a playlist, think about this door, and also think about the energy. Ask it, talk to Athena, talk to Mars. Think like that. When I say talk to it, I just mean ask questions about these things and hear what answers come back in your mind and just play around with that. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the chat, see if there are any questions or if anybody wants to say anything. I know there's just a few of us now. But if anybody has any questions or anything, I'm open to answer, even if it's not related necessarily to the first house. And then we can get going because it's 8. Oh my goodness. I think I should just extend these things to 2 hours. I could just ask you guys if that's something that you would be interested in, because for me, I'm always like an hour and 30 minutes, but this information, all this stuff is so dense. Okay, but I open the floor to you guys if you have any questions.